All right, I know I promised you a video this weekend about the NFL draft and pro days, but we have a couple pieces of breaking news out of Pittsburgh. First of all, the Steelers have re-signed JuJu Smith Schuster. He'll come back on a one-year deal worth a reported $8 million. They're also giving Steven Nelson, their cornerback, who's in the last year of his deal, they're giving him permission to seek a trade. And by all reports, he will either be traded or cut but at some point this off season. And it seemed like when this news came out that these two pieces of news were related, right? This was the fact that they're signing JuJu means that they have to get rid of Steven Nelson, because Steven Nelson will save them just over $8 million against the cap, and JuJu's going to be brought in on a one-year deal worth $8 million. And all of that made a lot of sense in that initial reporting. But now, as the day has gone by here, and I'm recording this on Saturday early afternoon, JuJu has signed the deal. They have not traded Steven Nelson yet. They were able to make the JuJu deal work by adding void years to this. So it's a $1 million base salary for JuJu, a $7 million signing bonus with 3 void years, meaning that JuJu will count just $3.3 million against the cap in 2021. The Steelers had $4 million available to them. So they were able to make this work without making any moves whatsoever. So I don't know that these Steven Nelson and JuJu deals are correlated as much as the initial reporting would have you believe. But let's start with the JuJu deal itself, right? The big news that the Steelers are getting JuJu back. As I've talked about in weeks past, I thought that this was more likely than not that JuJu would be back with the Steelers for a couple reasons. One, we knew the Steelers were interested, right? We knew Ben Roethlisberger was interested, and him coming back for one final season, him making the pitch of, hey, I'd like to have JuJu back here, and I'll take a pay cut to come back, and hopefully you can work the JuJu deal out. I think that is no coincidence whatsoever, right? The fact that he took a pay cut, along with the fact that the Steelers were able to get this JuJu deal done, I think those two things are correlated. I think it's a great deal for the Steelers overall, though, right? Because JuJu wanted to stay in Pittsburgh. He took less money to stay in Pittsburgh, so the Steelers get him on what is really a value deal, especially when you consider some of the other deals we've seen wide receivers take. Now, look, JuJu didn't get a big long-term deal. And so, when we were talking originally about him getting $16 million a year, $15 million a year, the wide receiver market was just too cold for that overall, right? It wasn't just a JuJu problem. We're seeing even guys like Kenny Golladay who are not getting the offers that they expected, right? And there's still reports that he wants $18 million a year. It doesn't seem like he's going to cash in for $18 million a year. But even you look around the league at like a Will Fuller, who signed a one-year deal with Miami for over $10 million, right? So the fact that JuJu's coming back to the Steelers for just 8, it's a good deal for the Steelers. And you also consider the fact that the other deals that reportedly were offered to JuJu were from Baltimore with a $9 million contract, $4 million in incentives in that deal. So JuJu certainly could have taken that deal and potentially made far more money if those incentives kicked in. He also was offered a one-year deal by the Chiefs, the Kansas City Chiefs, the team that played in the Super Bowl in that offense. Could you imagine JuJu in that offense? And he turned down a one-year $8 million deal with $1 million in incentives. In that deal, the Steelers offered him $8 million flat. It's an $8 million flat deal. Seems like it's not an incentive-laden contract in any way. And, of course, the Steelers really can't do a lot of incentives here because they don't have the cap space to fit that in. So the Steelers get JuJu back on, what was basically seemed like one of his lowest offers. But he loves the city of Pittsburgh. And I think the one thing this does prove, it's all the BS at the end of last season. The Browns is the Browns, right? All the TikTok dancing, that didn't have an effect. Number one, it didn't have an effect on the Steelers, and they're wanting to bring him back. And the fans' reaction to that, and I think it's a minority of fans here, but I do think that certainly there were Steeler fans who were not happy with JuJu, but that didn't turn him away from the city. Right? He still loves the city, still loves playing for the Steelers, and still wants to be a part of this organization. If you listen to him on NFL Network, he said, I would love to be a part of this organization long term if we can make the cap work after this season. But good news for the Steelers to bring him back, as I've talked about. They needed the reliability in the room. Part of bringing JuJu back, right? Part of the reason why the Steelers had to bring JuJu back, or felt like they had to bring JuJu back, was because of the failings of a guy like Diontae Johnson, right? Diontae Johnson had 14 drops last year. That was most in the National Football League. And when that's supposed to be your number one guy, right? And your other number one is Chase Claypool, who's going into his second year, right? And you're building a team that you think is going to make one last shot at the Super Bowl. Good luck with that, right? This is an offense-driven league. You need to have a good wide receiving core, and certainly to make this offense work with a running game right now that it's going to be a revamped offensive line, and we'll see what they can land in the draft at running back, but certainly you're going to need a wide receiver core to make this thing work. And that wide receiver core, including Deontay Johnson and even Eric Ebron, who's a leading target last year, one of the leading targets last year. Again, just not a lot of reliability in that room. So bringing JuJu back, I think, does bring a level of reliability and certainly a level of comfort with Ben Roethlisberger. JuJu also talked about how excited he was to work with Matt Canada in this offense, expecting big things. You know, a lot of player speak there, right? Of course, he's not going to come out and diss Matt Canada the moment he signs this new contract. So you expect him to say something like that. But I guess still encouraging nonetheless. I would love to see, though, Matt Canada kind of use JuJu maybe more on the outside or just more downfield, right? I think JuJu was so miscast last year as this kind of underneath-only type of receiver. And he wasn't the only one. I mean, the offense was very much a quick strike type of offense. But, man, JuJu averaging just, 8.3 yards per catch, which was third worst in the National Football League among wide receivers. We know he can be a big play. We know he can be a catch and run type of receiver. We've seen him do 2 97-yard catch and run plays. Okay, so we know he's capable of that. He's got to be put in a position to make those kind of plays. And so, hopefully Matt Canada can unlock that again within JuJu's game. Now let's transition here and let's start talking about Steven Nelson and what's going on here, right? Why are the Steelers looking to trade or potentially even cut Steven Nelson, the cornerback who for the last 2 years has been very good? As I said on last week's podcast, I think Steven Nelson's been what? The third best corner the Steelers have had in the last 20 years. Ike Taylor, and then you've got Joe Hayden and Steven Nelson, right? I mean, those are your best 3 corners in the last 20 years. And the Steelers are going to let him walk? I mean, potentially cut him? Trading him, okay, I can understand trading him. And when the news first came out that they were granting permission for a trade, my first thought was, oh, they can't work out a long-term deal with Steven Nelson. Because we've talked a lot about how the Steelers can open cap space, and one of the big ones to me was, well, you got to get the deal done for Nelson because he's in the last year of his deal. Cornerback is still going to be a big need for this team in 2022 when Joe Hayden likely walks. And so, yes, Cam Sutton comes back, and that's great, but you need to have Steven Nelson in that room because otherwise it's Cam Sutton and not a whole lot else. So I felt like the Nelson deal was going to be a big priority. And maybe it was a priority for this team. But if Steven Nelson's coming back, and I imagine the Steelers offered him a deal that looked a lot like Joe Hayden's deal, right? $11-12 million a year would be a bump up in pay from what he was making on his previous deal, which was $8.5. So I have to imagine they did want to give him a bump there, but he may have wanted to go, especially considering how well he's played for the last 2 years. He may have been looking for a deal in the $15 million a year range, or maybe even higher than that. And if the Steelers aren't willing to go there, well, okay, then they need to look elsewhere, right? Now, look, trading him will clear some cap space out, and it'll accelerate that draft pick. Because if you imagine a year from now, they let him walk because they can't work out an extension, well, he will sign a deal somewhere else, and they'll get a compensatory pick, potentially. But remember, the Steelers are also going to be flushed with cap space next year, so they'll likely be making some free agent signings of their own, which could get, it can cancel itself out. So trading him right now actually made some sense to me, even though, again, it bothers me that this is a team that wants you to believe that they are going all in for one season behind Ben Roethlisberger to win a Super Bowl, right? That's what we're doing. That's why they're going to take a running back in the first round, even though, historically speaking, not a great idea to take a running back in the first round. The longevity of the position just is not there. But, hey, 1 year, we need a great running back. We need a guy who can get yards on his own. They're probably going to take a running back in the first round. They're going to make all these moves, right, bringing Ben back for one final year. All these moves to say, hey, we're making one run this year, right? We're making this one final run. Well, you got to have good corners. You can't get rid of Steven Nelson. So I understand, longevity of this team. Yeah, maybe it's better to accelerate the draft pick you'll get for Nelson to this season. You can get a player who can contribute right now, but you're really going to hurt the secondary. Right now, as we sit here today, you have Joe Hayden starting outside corner. You probably have, Cam Sutton is a starting outside corner, and you have a problem at nickel. Now, we've talked about Justin Layne and where he is in his development, and he was passed up last year by James Pierre. Layne is clearly not the guy. Layne is clearly not the reason why the Steelers are making this move. It's not that they believe in Justin Layne. I guess it could be that they believe in James Pierre. I guess that is possible. Now, James Pierre didn't play a lot of snaps last year. So, doing the film breakdown of him and looking at his snaps, the problem with evaluating James Pierre is that there's just not enough reps. We're talking about a guy last year who I believe played something like 18 reps on passing downs. He was targeted just twice. Okay, and one of those targets was a wide receiver screen, which he did make the tackle. So credit to him on that. But again, that's just not enough to really have a full film evaluation for us as outside evaluators. Now, maybe the Steelers have seen something going all the way back to training camp and throughout the season that elevated him up the roster, that made him kind of the first corner off the bench there at the end of the season in that wild card game where he played, I believe it was 8-10 reps in that game above Justin Lane. Maybe they believe in him. It's hard for me to believe that they think that he's ready to come in and start right away above Steven Nelson. But again, we talk, they want to they can accelerate this draft pick. I'm torn here. I am so torn about the Steven Nelson thing. Because if you're going for, if you're making this all-in push this season, we're going to win a Super Bowl right now. Well, then in some ways you have to mortgage the future. And we've seen them do that already. These void years that they add to Ben's deal. That's mortgaging the future in some way by taking away cap space for the future to make this happen right now. The JuJu deal, okay, which again is only going to count $3.3 million against this year's cap. But that means it's going to count, 4.7 against next year's cap? And they did this, and by the way, they also cleared some cap space by making that Cam Sutton deal actually a 4-year deal, but 2 of those are void years. So even pushing some of the Cam Sutton money out. All of these deals they keep making with these void years are mortgaging the future to win right now. So if we're mortgaging the future to win right now, why are we trading Steven Nelson? Again, I just can't square that in my head. And that's the problem I have with this deal. Trading him, again, they have to trade him. If they cut him, it's a disaster. You get nothing back for Steven Nelson. You create a problem for yourself on the roster. Yes, you get back the $8.25 million that he has as a base salary this year. And you can go out and make some moves for that. But are you going to get a corner back into this roster that you think is going to be on the Steven Nelson level? And I will even agree that Steven Nelson's play dropped off last year. It did. But still, who are they going to? I like Cam Sutton, but the Steelers right now can easily put Cam Sutton as the slot guy. And even if they like James Pierre, a lot, he's the first guy off the bench. Great. He had a lot of problems last year with Joe Hayden going out of games. That's why Cam Sutton was so good for this team, because he was able to fill in for spots when Hilton had to sit out a game or when Hayden had to sit out. So, again, just don't. What bothers me about this team right now is that in an effort to clear cap space, a team that wants you to believe it's all in continues to create problems for itself right now. We go back to the cutting of Vince Williams, right? Stephon Tuitt still has not had his contract restructured. It has not happened yet. That's $3.5 million in available cap space the Steelers just still not have done. Again, if we're mortgaging the future, kick the can down the road, Steelers. Put some of Tuitt's money into next season. That's fine. We're winning a Super Bowl right now. Make the money now without creating problems for yourself now. So we'll see what happens. Again, I don't want to get too worked up about the Steven Nelson deal just yet because nothing's actually happened. All we have is basically reports that are saying that Steven Nelson will either be traded or cut. If he's traded, it's better than him being cut. I'd love for him to be on the roster, but that doesn't seem to be in the cards right now. So we'll go forward with that. But I think that, again, the biggest news here, the Steelers are getting JuJu back. I think it's huge news for the offense. It's huge news for the receiving game. It means that the receiving core for this team is as deep as it's been in any year now, especially now knowing what we have in Chase Claypool, right? And the fact that going into year 2, we do expect a leap from him. We do expect him to become a number 1 type receiver. And you add that to a room with a Deontay Johnson already, and now JuJu Smith Schuster and James Washington, of course. It's a room you have to like in an offense-driven league, a pass-happy league. It's something you have to like in Pittsburgh. All right, that'll do it for me today. I know I promised you the pro day thing, so we're still going to get to that. I'll probably do it next week. Certainly, I think that'll maybe will be an emphasis in next week's show because there's a lot to talk about with pro days, who the Steelers are looking at, and we can now recontextualize what pro days the Steelers are attending, and certainly what pro days Kevin Colbert and Mike Tomlin are attending as we get to what the draft priorities are going to be. Now, knowing that corner may be a big need in this draft, well, they went to Georgia, right? They saw Eric Stokes live in person, and I think that maybe can give us a hint as to how big a priority the Steelers know corner is going to be if they get rid of Steven Nelson. So look for that video coming up. Still trying to work on Nick Farabaugh, getting him in early next week, so that interview likely will happen as well. Thank you all for watching and listening. If you want to leave feedback, SteelerCountry@gmail.com is the email address. You can follow me on Twitter @SteelerCountry, and I'll be back soon with more Steeler Country.